Section 20 of Gallipoli Diary. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sue Anderson. Gallipoli Diary by John Graham Gillam. Section 20, November 26th to 30th, 1915. November 26th. Yes, I think evacuation has been definitely decided on. So our little camp has been built for nothing. However, it keeps us employed, for life is deadly dull. This, then, is to be the end. After all these months of blood and sweat, of feverish anticipation and dismal results, after all the toil, the hardships and sorrows, with the little graveyards getting fuller and fuller every day as I have passed them, all this is for nothing, and we are leaving? I am glad, yet full of regrets, excited too at the prospect of getting back to civilization once more. Alexandria and all its delights will seem like paradise. The cozy dinners at the club, the shops, and the meeting with old friends left behind. These are some of the emotions that I experience at the thought of evacuation. The wind is getting up once more, and the sea becomes stormy. The field ambulance receive orders to evacuate all patients at once to casualty clearing stations. At the clearing stations they are hard at work evacuating all cases onto the lighters for transmission to the hospital ships. Afternoon. The sea is very rough. A lighter full of sick and a few wounded has been washed ashore. 2 cases have been drowned. All further evacuation has stopped. The battleships are heavily bombarding Turkish positions. Over Imbros, black clouds, heavy with rain, are sailing towards us. We are in for a dirty night. We are in the middle of loading our army transport carts when heavy spots of rain drop, and looking up we see the sky getting blacker and blacker with storm clouds. Luckily, issuing is nearly finished. The transport of many of the battalions has moved off, when a flash of forked lightning rushes from the sky to the sea, and almost instantly a deafening crash of thunder bursts overhead. This flash is followed by another and another, and then several in different parts of the sky stab the black clouds at the same moment. The rain gently begins to hiss, the hiss getting louder and louder, developing into a noise like the sound of loudly escaping steam, until, as if the clouds have all burst together, water deluges the earth in a soaking torrent. Black night soon falls upon us, changing at short intervals momentarily into day as the forked flashes of lightning stab the earth, sky, and sea. The beachmen, bending double under the downfall of water and the struggle against the wind as they walk, appear in vivid detail and disappear in the fraction of a second as the lightning plays overhead. Soon a pouring torrent of water a foot deep is raging down the gullies, turning the ravines, large and small, down the slopes of the hill into rushing cascades, washing away dugouts as if they were paper, and filling to the brim every crevice and hollow on the lower land. The new camps of trenches into which men have rushed for shelter are half filled with water, which in less than an hour overflows the drains on either side that we had dug to prevent such an event happening. All the weary weeks of engineer labor lost in a short time. I go back to our new dugout and meet a sorry sight. Our cookhouse, wherein our dinner was being prepared, washed off the face of the earth. The roof and the back part of the mess room had fallen in, covering furniture with mud and debris, and flooding the floor with water 6 inches deep. I have to go to the Corps Transport Depot about some water carts for the trenches, so taking my torch I cross the gully. The rain is pouring in torrents, and as I walk the rushing water from the hills washes round my feet high above my ankles. Parts of dugouts, boxes, men's kits, etc. continually come floating down on top of the rushing stream. The thunder crashes overhead, and my torch is unnecessary, for the incessant flashes of forked lightning illuminate my way. The wind beating against my face takes my breath away, and makes the climb up the high slope exhausting. I arrive at the mess dugout of the 9th Corps transport. Their dugout is intact, for it is on steeply sloping ground, but their floor is over 6 inches deep in water. They are all sitting at dinner with gum boots on, and are a merry party. Afterwards I climb to Division Headquarters, arriving breathless. Back in our dugout the storm, still raging, appears to go round and round in circles, first dying off somewhat, then rushing back with renewed fury. It runs its wild course till about 8 o'clock, when it seems to pass away over Sari Bair, leaving heavy clouds pouring their burden of rain into the flooded gullies and trenches. Towards 9 the downfall slackens, and shortly after stars become visible, and the black clouds gradually roll away over the hills of Gallipoli. We have a meal of bully beef and bread, for our dinner has been washed away and no hot food is possible. The wind from the northwest still blows with great violence, and it becomes steadily colder and colder. 2 of our dugouts are intact, and we turn into these and get off to sleep, wondering if the drainage system in the trenches has answered its demands. November 27th. We wake up to find a drizzly rain falling, blown by a strong north wind. Mud is everywhere, and the whole of the beaches a quagmire. What were once dugouts are now large puddles full of water. The system of trenches for winter quarters across the various gullies and nullahs has ceased to exist. Many of these are full to the brim with water. All have water and mud covering their floors. 12 men taking shelter in their trench, which was roofed by corrugated iron, and which is situated in the gully in which we lived up to a week ago, have been drowned by the roof collapsing. We have orders to send up medical comforts. We send them up by Army transport carts. For the first time a convoy of Army transport carts is seen on the Gibraltar Road in broad daylight. A gale develops in the afternoon. Elphinstone and I go up to Hill 10. The road is in many parts under water, and the whole a bog of wet, tenacious clay that clings to one's boots and almost pulls their heels off as one raises each foot. What before was a pleasant country walk is now a hard, exhausting, slow treadmill, made in a gale that one has to determinedly bend one's back to make any headway at all. Last night the pack mules had the greatest difficulty in getting the rations up, and 1 or 2 that fell into ravines were drowned. We call at the West Riding Royal Engineers, and in Major Bailey's dugout I find the floor a foot deep in water, and Major Bailey perched up on a table, his feet resting on a ledge of the dugout, endeavoring to get warm from an oil drum fire. He appears as cheery as ever. In fact, every time I see him he is always merry and bright, evidently a habit, and a habit worth cultivating. We arrange the position of the new ration dump, though it is difficult to find cover for it. A line of bushes is the only protection we can find. We go over to the Dublin camp in the reserve trenches by Hill 10, and of course it is flooded and the men in a wretched condition. We see the officer in charge about fatigues for the unloading of rations. As we come away we meet Colonel Fuller, our first General Staff officer, who asks as to the conditions of the roads on our left, and we cannot give him anything but a bad report. We continue our way past the barbed wire and second line trenches to the 86th and 88th Brigade Headquarters. Turkish artillery is dead quiet, and hardly a rifle shot is to be heard. Both Brigade Headquarters have withstood the storm well, protected as they are by the small hills on the side of which they have been constructed, the ground sloping away in front. At the 86th Brigade we hear that our trenches on the lowland have been flooded to the brim, and in some parts are now completely under water. Sentries are lying flat in the mud and water outside, behind the trenches, watching the enemy and in full view of him. There they lie, keeping guard, under such conditions as have hardly been known before, sniped at now and again, and occasionally becoming casualties. The 86th, being in the lowest trenches, suffered the worst. for suddenly, as their trenches became knee-deep in water, a torrent burst into a saphead, and in a few minutes had swallowed up the first line, the dugouts and communication trenches. Men floundered about, swarmed here and there, and clambered out onto the open. A few less fortunate were drowned. Could it ever have been imagined that men would drown in a trench? This has now happened, and their bodies lie half floating, half resting on the bottom of the trench, waiting to be dragged out when nightfall comes. In this terribly cold northerly wind, gradually beginning to freeze, those waiting sentries, with their clothes soaking wet through, watch for the enemy, who probably is worse off than we are. As often as possible they are relieved, the relief creeping up in the broad open, chancing the sniper's easy shot. As we talk, a man comes past, leaning on the arms of two Royal Army Medical Corps men, who are taking him back to the advanced dressing station a little way back. His face is blue and swollen, and his teeth chattering as if with fever. We go round to the headquarters of the 88th Brigade and ask for instructions as to what to send up in the way of food and medical comforts. In talking to General Cayley, we make the remark that we are glad that his dugout has not been washed away, but immediately feel reproved for having said this by his replying that it is not his dugout, but the poor chaps in the trenches that he worries about, because he can do nothing for them. It takes us about a quarter of the time to get back, for the wind literally blows us along, and it is difficult for us to keep our feet in the sticky mud. Once I slip while negotiating the side of a deep puddle and fall backwards into it, much to the amusement of some passing gunners. At night it steadily becomes colder and colder, and the driving misty rain turns to snow, a northerly cold blizzard setting in. I am up late arranging about the carting of the rations and blankets to the sea of mud that was once our trenches. It is freezing cold, but we shiver the more when we think of those men lying out in the open behind our front line. November 28th. We wake up to find it bitterly cold, and a northerly blizzard driving with great force down the hill. A staff officer comes into our dugout early and instructs me to get as many medical comforts as possible in the way of rum, brandy, milk, oxo, etc. up to the line. I go down to the main supply depot and there find shelters made of boxes and sail covers built as temporary hospitals. They are full of men frostbitten in legs, arms, and faces, who lie in great distress, suffering agonies as their blood warms up and circulates to the frozen parts of their bodies. A hospital ship is standing quite close inshore off West Beach, but 500 yards from the pier, the closest a hospital ship has moved to the beaches as yet. Hodsall, the officer commanding, a temporary Army Service Corps major, does all he can for me, and I collar all the comforts and fuel I can lay my hands on. There is a plentiful supply in spite of the heavy demands of yesterday. Again, as yesterday, these are conveyed up by daylight, and yet the Turks do not shell us. We are extraordinarily free from shell fire. Our line is held very thinly, only by forward parts, relieved in daylight at frequent intervals regardless of snipers. Last night the frost was severe, and the men lying out in the mud behind the soaking trenches suffered the greatest hardship that a soldier could endure, namely to lie out in the soaking clothes, which freeze stiff in a biting wind, while the temperature rapidly falls to below zero. The enemy is more inactive than he has ever been, showing that he has suffered as badly as we have, if not worse. In front of the 86th Brigade the Turks hold slightly higher ground than we do, and I think that they must have opened one or two of their sapheads when the trenches were flooded, thus allowing the water to rush over to our side, engulfing all our first-line dugouts and communication trenches. The gale blowing down from the northeast today is the fiercest that I have known, for as well as being biting cold, it drives stinging sleet before it with terrific force. As I talk to an officer on the hill of 9th Corps Gully outside my dugout, I have to stand with my legs wide apart bending my body against the wind to prevent myself from being blown backwards on the frozen ground. Many Turkish prisoners have come in as bad a state of collapse as our men. Last night a party of 40 came over unmolested as far as the gully behind our support trenches. Seeing some of our men crowding around a coke brazier endeavoring to get warm, they walked up to them with hands up, but were shooed away like a lot of sheep by our half-frozen Tommies, who advised them to get the hell out of it. Pondering, they walked over towards the Salt Lake and were taken in by the casualty clearing station on B Beach. This morning a few have died. Officers in the line, if they were not on watch, were huddled together all night endeavoring to get warmth from each other's bodies. Ration carts were unable to get to many parts of the line owing to the mud and water, in places being over the axles of the wheels. Quantities of rum and rations were lost in the mud. Telephone communication broke down, and many men, cut off from the rest and having to watch the enemy, froze and died at their posts. Today, walking cases are streaming and staggering down the roads from the trenches to advanced dressing stations, from advanced dressing stations to the casualty clearing station, which is rapidly becoming overcrowded. Such an influx of cases has come in so unexpectedly that the staff is unable to deal with them quickly. Frozen and frostbitten men continually stagger in, collapse on the damp floors of the tents and marquees, exhausted, to wait their turn for medical attention. The sea is rough and it is impossible to get the cases off to the hospital ship. One lighter has been swamped and a few cases drowned. Motor lorries are busy plying between the casualty clearing station and West Beach all day, for the casualty clearing station is crowded out. More improvised shelters have been put up in the main supply depot, in the ordnance marquees, and in dugouts on the beaches. 3 exhausted men staggering down the Gibraltar Road to the advanced dressing station are a unique party. Linking arms, they painfully stumble along to the refuge of a dressing station, where, on arrival, they are received with surprise and interest, for 2 are British Tommies and the 3rd a Turk, all allies against a common enemy. 7 p.m. Colonel Pearson, officer commanding Lancashire Fusiliers of Lancashire landing fame, visits us in an exhausted state, his clothes damp and sodden. We provide him with an outfit of dry clothes, gathered from our respective kits. He talks about going back to his regiment tonight, which is sheltering in the Commander Royal Engineers nullah by our forward ration dump, but I think soon he will collapse altogether and have to be evacuated. He was all last night holding a portion of our flooded, sodden and freezing line. At night, Horn and I go on to cart some of the rations from the Commander Royal Engineer dump to Hill 10 by Army transport carts. On arrival at the camp of the Royal Dublin Fusiliers, we find a poor, shivering fatigue party waiting for us. I had expected to find these men in a miserable condition, for their camp has suffered heavily in the storm, and even the best built dugouts have been washed entirely away. We have brought with us whiskey bottles filled with rum and water. As the last cart is unloaded, we hand the bottles to the sergeant, who calls the men up one at a time. They come forward eagerly as each name is called, Private Murphy, Private O'Brien, etc., and drink a tot from the bottle handed to them. It is amusing to watch them standing, waiting their turn with keen anticipation for a pull at the bottle, under the superintendence of their watchful sergeant, who regulates fair play in the length of the drink by interrupting an extra long one by snatching the bottle from the man's mouth now and again. As we go away, several of the men shout, "The blessings of Jesus be on you, sir," in a Dublin brogue, and we leave the poor devils to shiver in the camp the rest of the night. We are delayed in our return by a chase after 2 mules, which we capture after much difficulty amongst gorse bushes, trees and boulders. Calling in at the Australians' dugout on Kangaroo Beach, we see them sitting round a welcome log fire, and as we warm ourselves, a figure covered in a blanket, his head swathed in a cloth, creeps in stealthily like a cat. He is a half-frozen drabby, edging towards the fire to warm himself. An Australian makes him understand that he had better go back to his camp, and orders him out. He creeps out, but after a pause I see him come back stealthily once more, unnoticed by the others, and sit at the back of the stove on his haunches, his hands spread out for warmth. He is at last noticed, but someone says, "Let the poor devil be," and we go on talking, taking no notice of him. November 29th. The gale is still heavy, but the blizzard has stopped. The sky is clear overhead, but it is freezing hard, and the steady stream of casualties from the storm still continues to be evacuated. The whole countryside has frozen hard. All day we are hard at work, sending up comforts to the line and to the Commander Royal Engineers nullah, and nursing the casualties who have arrived in our little camp. The wind is slackening a little, and in consequence the sea is going down. Advantage is therefore being taken of this to thin down the overcrowded casualty clearing station and the many improvised shelters, which are overflowing with cases. The hospital ship is standing close inshore, only 500 yards off West Beach. My visits to Division Headquarters on the top of the hill above our gully are made today with great exertion in the teeth of the bitterly cold gale, and I arrive at the top each time absolutely exhausted. Before I go into the Deputy Assistant Quartermaster General's little dugout, which is his office and bedroom combined, I have to sit down on a boulder to recover my breath. Horn and I go up with the Army transport carts to take more of the forward reserve rations from the Commander Royal Engineers nullah over to the left of Hill 10, for 2 forward dumps have to be made of equal numbers of rations, and the one we have now is therefore being halved. Hill 10 is a position of which several of our batteries have taken advantage, and in consequence is a favorite target of the Turkish gunners. One veritably walks on a surface of shrapnel bullets around this hill, lying like pebbles on the shore. On arrival at the nullah we find that all the supply boxes, with their tarpaulin covers, have been built up to form a large improvised dressing station. They are full of cases of frostbite and exhaustion. From all around comes the sound of men groaning. And so the carting of rations to Hill 10 is off tonight. As I walk back I hear a groaning voice calling, "Mother! Mother!" and peering through the darkness of the night, I see the form of a man lying under a gorse bush. Poor devil! His mother, to whom he calls, is probably knitting him socks at home. We carry him along to the 89th Field Ambulance Dressing Station, just to the right of the nullah, having to negotiate a muddy brook on the way. We walk back fast to get up a circulation, and find on arrival that a nice fire has been kept up. The roads are hardening with the frost. This will aid the solution of the transport difficulties, which have been almost insuperable during these awful last few days, for the wind has been so strong as to almost prevent the use of the light motor ambulance, and horse transport is restricted, owing, I find, to animals having already been evacuated just before the storm. November 30th. We awake to find the gale has died away. It is a cool, beautiful day with not a cloud in the sky. In fact, the sun is beaming warm. It is hard to believe that we have just passed through a terrible blizzard. The beach is crowded with cases of frostbite waiting for evacuation, which is rapidly going on now. Men lie about everywhere on the beaches, with their limbs swathed in bundles of bandages. Many cases are serious, and not a few will lose their limbs. The main supply depot is now a large hospital of shelters built of boxes and sail covers. All over the beaches men are hunting around for lost property buried in the mud. Dugouts and trenches are being drained of the remaining water. The beaches are gradually becoming themselves again. The division has suffered heavily. On the inspection of the Royal Fusiliers today, one company, on being called to attention, proved to be a company consisting of Captain Guy, a sergeant major, and a private. Captain Guy shouted, "Sergeant Major, call the company to attention." The sergeant major then shouted, "W Company Shun," and the one man left, who was the company cook, sprang to attention. Guy, 45 years of age, and who at the best of times could not be called robust looking, stuck this storm through at his post in the trenches, which are situated on the lowest ground, trenches which in consequence suffered the worst of all, until he was relieved. He told me after that on coming back on relief he came to a small nullah, and that he was so weak and finished that he actually cried like a child before he could summon up the willpower to get across that little brook, which at ordinary times he would have cleared at a leap. Later. The evacuation of Suvla, which was decided on before the storm and then cancelled, I believe has now been finally decided on. Parties are now hard at work at night improving the second line, which stretches behind our first line on the same latitude as our Commander Royal Engineers dump, across the Gibraltar Road and over to Hill 10. A third line is being dug just a short way in on the mainland from W Beach, and over the hill of the promontory a fourth line also. Our dugout is now being rapidly repaired, and the dugouts behind on the higher ground, 1 story higher, are now finished. All the dugouts are built together as a whole, really forming a picturesque house. On the ground floor, up a short path bordered by little gorse bushes and a rockery, one enters our mess room, furnished with a table, armchairs, and a stove made from an oil drum. 2 smaller rooms lead out from the left and 2 from the right. One is the clerk's office, in which he sleeps, and the other 3 are each occupied by Horn, Elphinstone, and myself. Next to our dugouts on the same level are the dugouts of the quartermasters of a few regiments, which are built on the same scale as ours, but separated by a flight of about a dozen steps, running up in a bend to a row of smaller dugouts, which house the non-commissioned officers of our supply section, a few quartermaster sergeants, regimental non-commissioned officers, and the 2 brigade postal staffs. Opposite in the gully, as the trenches that we had made are now damaged beyond repair by the recent storm, the remainder of the men live in shelters made from sail covers and tarpaulins, with shrapnel-proof roofs, built in places where boulders and mounds of earth protect them from high explosive shells. Behind us is an Egyptian encampment, situated in full view of the Turks among rocks and boulders, but as they sleep most of the day, working only at night digging on the beaches, they cause very little movement to be seen by the enemy, and in consequence have been very little shelled. If a shell does come near them, however, they make no bones about running as far away as possible, chattering like a lot of chickens. All day cases of frozen men, now happily diminishing in number, are being shipped off. It was the most terrible storm I have ever witnessed. End of section 20. Gallipoli Diary. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sue Anderson. Gallipoli Diary by John Graham Gillam. Section 21. December 1st to 16th, 1915. December 1st. A beautiful day, but very cold. Turks shell the beaches pretty heavily in the morning and afternoon with high explosive and cause some casualties. Quite a new kind of shell, I think, and from new guns. One shell hits our depot, smashing our clerk's office, but fortunately nobody is hurt. Poindexter of the Munsters, a charming boy, comes to spend a few days with us. He was out on the parapet during the night of the storm and was carried back unconscious, but is now quite fit again. Times are rather anxious just at present. Troops arrived this morning to reinforce. Evacuation of stores and equipment proceeding full steam ahead. December 2nd. Drafts arrived for the 29th Division. A beautiful day and not too cold. Turks busy with shrapnel. Go up to Brigade Headquarters with Horn. While up there, Turks shell beaches. Suddenly they open fire with 2 guns and shower of 5.9 shrapnel along the new second line trenches which we have just passed. We have not had this 5.9 shrapnel since October 27th. About 40 shells come over in rapid succession, 2 at a time. I hope they do not pepper the beaches with them. The ground is still damp after the flood. We are warned to expect many of these floods and blizzards. We passed General Byng and staff while up at Brigade. General Cayley still as cheery as ever. Everybody busy repairing damaged dugouts. Work of evacuation proceeding very well. I wonder if John Turk can see. We have the advantage of the piers and beaches being under cover. December 3rd. We now hear a rumor that we are not evacuating at all, and that only the 29th are going, but I do not believe this. We learn this rumor from Sergeant Jones, of Jones's water dump. Every day rumors are circulated from Sergeant Jones's dugout on A Beach. All day officers and men who pass call in here and say, "Good morning," or "Good evening, Jones. What is the latest rumor?" They are invited to sit down while Jones tells the latest and best that he has heard from all sources, trenches, Navy, and beaches. I have seen at one time in Jones's dugout a brigadier, major, and 2 captains and a corporal all sitting around the oil stove fire, while Sergeant Jones at his table is eating his supper. As an officer comes in, Jones stands up saying, "Good evening, sir. What can I do for you?" If it is water required, then that worry has to be settled. If it is an ordinary call at this halfway house, then the officer is invited to sit down by the fire, Jones adding, if he should be at supper, "Will you excuse me going on with my supper, won't you, sir?" One night he said to me, "May I press you to a plate of porridge, sir?" We do not look upon him as a soldier or a non-commissioned officer. It is difficult to describe how we regard him. He is popular with everybody, and all the officers, after a while, fall into the same manner of dealing and talking with him. Personally, I feel my relations with him are as they would be to the landlord of a familiar roadside inn. A Beach now being deserted, all and sundry, with the exception of Jones, being shelled out, Jones has to remain there, for this beach is the only possible place for a water dump. Dugout and dump remind me of a lonely roadside inn, where I call on my journeys between the beaches and the line. He gets shelled now and again, and has had some remarkably lucky escapes. Men have been killed right and left of him, but most of the drawing of the water is done under the cover of the night. Happily for our division, the water question has been nearly solved by our engineers finding wells behind our part of the line, although we still have to draw water by cart from Jones to augment the supply from the forward wells. Other divisions, however, are not so fortunate. They continue to nightly draw water from Jones for the troops in the line and reserve nullahs by all kinds of receptacles, and cart it up on army transport carts. Scotch mist and drizzly rain all day. Hardly any shelling on our front or on part of Turks. More drafts for 29th Division arrive. We are now making a rest camp in one of the nullahs, where men can change their clothes in case the weather gets bad again. December 4th. A very calm day, cold, cloudy, and dull. All last night there was quite a lot of rifle fire and bombing. Starting at daybreak, Turks get very busy with shrapnel, of which they appear to have plenty. At midday they are bombarding our position very energetically. We reply, and the battleships join in. In the afternoon our neighborhood is shelled with these new high explosive shells, one shell dropping in our supply depot, but no one is hurt. Dusk, and all is quiet. A relief. Poindexter leaves Peninsula. Lucky devil! We have shipped off today a lot of base kits, surplus baggage, ordnance stores, and even food supplies by means of the army transport carts and on the tramway running in the sunken trench. Army transport carts returning empty from the trenches have been bringing large quantities of surplus kit and stores away during the last few nights. Under the cover of the protecting mounds of earth they have been offloaded onto lighters, which, with no attempt to disguise their intentions, have been towed out to supply ships, making fast on the side away from the enemy, their cargo being loaded by the ship's derricks into the various holds. Very little of this work has been done so far, but it is obvious to all that we are evacuating in the near future. I can't describe our feelings. Up to a short time ago stores were being busily unloaded day and night, and now the reverse is happening. It is as if a high commander had suddenly shouted the order, "As you were." December 5th. Heavy gunning all day by both sides, very heavy and continuous. From 12 to 1 the Turks give us a general bombardment, and we get our share in our little camp. Men's cookhouse wrecked, but no one hurt. The cook happens to be at the depot 100 yards down the gully drawing rations. It is evident that the Turks are now getting regular supplies of ammunition, probably direct from Germany. We are looking to Russia. If only she can come through Romania and attack Bulgaria in the rear and cut off Turkey, Turkey is finished. We get rumors that she is through, and are rather looking towards her as a besieged city looks towards its deliverers. Snipers busy just now on account of the exposed position of our washed-out trenches. Fresh drafts arrive for the 29th. Is it to be an evacuation for all, or is the 29th only going? If so, why did drafts arrive for the 29th? December 6th. A very beautiful day. Turks busy shelling us. We reply energetically. One continued roar of guns all day. Our beaches shelled midday and late afternoon. But very few casualties, the mounds of earth affording excellent cover, and all shells are high explosive, no shrapnel. Trenches are still in a muddy state in low land. At night we shelled their positions. December 7th. A very beautiful cool day, but it is getting colder. Turks start shelling us early. Their shells are much improved and are evidently new. Horn and I start off to Brigade Headquarters after lunch, walking up our gully. We pass a boxing match in full swing. I do not think that the men know anything of the evacuation. I hear unofficially that it has been postponed indefinitely. Perhaps it is off altogether. We appear to be getting through the winter so well that perhaps it might be as well to stick these storms and not give up this job of forcing the Dardanelles, which, if successful, would mean so much to the cause of the Allies. As we near the top of the gully, we hear the boom of a gun, coming from the direction in which we are walking. It is the first time that a shell for the beach has come from this direction. By its sound, I know instinctively that the beastly thing is coming down very near us. I shout to Horn, "Drop flat!" and both of us fall beside a prickly gorse bush as the thing bursts with a deafening explosion on the high ground on our right. We get to our feet and look back at the boxing match, and cannot help being amused at the way the Tommies have quickly cleared or lain down, with the instinct of veterans of the beaches. The combatants in the ring, who have paused, resume their match. The crowd again collects, continually being added to by a stream of men coming over the skyline from the next gully. This should draw Turkey's fire, and sure enough it does, for as we reach the hill at the top of the gully we hear another coming. We duck behind a boulder as it passes over our heads and bursts 20 yards our side of the boxing ring. This clears the crowd and ends the match for the day. The Turks cannot see the gully, but they know that men are collecting there by the procession of them streaming over the skyline of the promontory. As we walk on towards the 88th Field Ambulance, about 4 more shells scream over the hill to the gully, which by this time is deserted, and as we sit in the ambulance waiting for a friend who is walking up with us to Brigade Headquarters, the Turks increase their range and send a few nice, fat, juicy ones over to the beaches. Leaving the ambulance, we walk down the slope to the Gibraltar Road and meet Grant, our 3rd General Staff Officer, who has just come back from the trenches. He is in shorts, caked with mud up to his knees, and thickly bespattered over the rest of his body, which gives evidence of the present state of the trenches, even though it is over 10 days since the storm. He tells us that in 15 minutes we are going to open fire with all guns onto the unfortunate Pimple. We continue our way up the Gibraltar road, when at 4 o'clock precisely, the ship's guns, with a roar that makes me jump, for I am again walking in a direct line from which they are firing, fire, and the great shells screaming overhead can be seen bursting with great violence on the insignificant geographical formation. Almost at once all shore batteries pour shells in rapid succession onto the small target of the Pimple, which disappears from sight under a great cloud of drifting dust and smoke of all colors. Arriving at Brigade Headquarters, we find McLaughlin on the roof of his dugout, looking at the show through glasses, and we join him. As is always the case when John Turk is being bombarded, the bullets become free and frequent, and overs begin to fly about us. We have tea with McLaughlin and sit around the nice brick open hearth in which a log fire is burning, and chat. The General and Brigade Major are up at Gun Hill observing the show. Heavy gunning is heard in the south all the afternoon. At night the Turk sends a shell over our way at odd intervals, but in our gully we are practically safe, for his targets are usually the beaches. December 9th. Yes, the evacuation of Suvla is now a reality. I hear today that we have now begun the intermediate stage of the evacuation. It has been a reality for some days. The storm only delayed it. We have just completed the preliminary stage. We hear that it will be but a few days now when not a British subject will be left alive here, unless as a prisoner. The shelling today is in fits and starts. High explosive shells are searching the beach, bursting well and with a louder explosion than in past days. But West Beach is well protected, and the steady shipment of vehicles and ordnance goes on all day. At night, empty ration carts go up to the line to bring back men's surplus kits, blankets, surplus ammunition, and the surplus part of the usual accumulation of baggage that a regiment takes with it to the trenches and to dumps just behind. Horn, Elphinstone, Hunt, and I are on the beach all night, taking shifts in superintending the unloading of the carts as they arrive back full. They come back in a steady stream. The carts that have taken up rations, stores, special ammunition such as bombs, etc., earlier in the evening, all return loaded with kits. We have a few men to help us, but hardly enough, and we therefore work ourselves to keep warm. It is a monotonous job. The drabbies appear fed up, and we have to watch them carefully to see that they do not slope off with their loaded carts to their lines. Kipling once said, "East is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet." Is this correct? I wonder, for our Tommies seem to work amicably with the drabbies. The white transport corporal who was with us marshalling the transport, on receiving an order from me, shouts out into the darkness of the beach to the Indian jemadar, "Mohammed Hussan!" A voice answers back with a drawl, "Hullo!" My corporal shouts back, "Wait arf a mo, will you?" And the voice answers, "All right," east and west. All night lighters are being loaded up and towed out to the ships. Last Army transport carts unloaded at 5 a.m. We turn in at 5:30 a.m., ready for sleep. December 10th. A fine, cool day. Usual shelling with hot stuff shells. Evacuation of stores going on apace. I think the 29th is to be the last off. Medical comforts in the way of champagne, port, brandy, and whiskey are now going cheap, and I send them round to all the battalion messes, the 2 brigades, and divisional headquarters. They are not troubling to evacuate this stuff, and I am trying to get a full share for the 29th. Personally, I should like to give them champagne dinners every night, after what they have been through. No food being landed now except a little bread and fresh meat. Instead of that, the reserve at the depot is being steadily reduced. December 11th. Last night work went steadily on. the loading up of lighters and the towing of these to ships, where the derricks, rattling away feverishly, emptied them. A surprisingly large quantity of all kinds of material has been evacuated, yet the beaches and the life thereon appear unchanged. All tentage and camps are to be left standing, and up to the last day as much transport as possible will move about on the top of the promontory. Tonight the 89th Field Ambulance has left, together with some men on light duty, also a large number of men from the 11th and 13th Divisions. December 12th. Nothing of much account today. Everybody hard at work, dismantling and getting away all impedimenta. It can readily be realized what a vast amount of all kinds and conditions of stores and equipment this impedimenta represents for an army of 60,000 men who have been stationary on a small bit of land for over 4 months. The work goes on, punctuated at intervals by a few shells from the enemy's batteries. But it is quite normal shelling, and I feel sure the Turks know nothing. They can see nothing. The staff work is excellent. The beach each day appears unchanged. Many troops, beach details, etc. move off. December 13th. A cold south wind is blowing and makes us all very anxious. Is it going to develop into another storm which will upset all our well-laid plans and so place us at the mercy of the Turk? These are anxious days. We are now issuing rations from the forward reserve stock in the Commander Royal Engineers nullah nightly, and our dump on the beach is now clear. Medical comforts are liberal, and also milk, which the troops appreciate, but bread and meat are issued only in very small quantities. The rations at Hill 10 are untouched, remaining there to be issued should we have to hold the second line of trenches, which are now complete. Work is being carried on feverishly for completing the third line. All work on the lowland has to be done at night, but on the high ground, where nullahs and dips in the ground afford cover, work goes on by day and night. Meeting places have been arranged, where the troops will concentrate before proceeding to the beaches on the night that they have orders to evacuate. They are termed posts, and are lettered W, Y, Z, etc., the letters showing illuminated through a dark background. Of course, all such posts are placed in positions which are under cover. Each unit is to be guided to the post allotted to it, there to await orders, which will be telephoned up to the post from the piers. An officer of the evacuation staff will wait at the post telephone for the message from the beach, after marshalling and checking the troops on arrival there. I see Brigade Headquarters each night now when I am up at the Commander Royal Engineers dump issuing the daily rations. Their headquarters are now in the same headquarters as the Commander Royal Engineers had. Next door is the Brigade Headquarters of a brigade of artillery, the guns of which are in position nearby in front, just behind and round about. While there, an officer told me that if necessary his guns will be putting up a curtain of fire over the Turks should they attempt to follow on after our troops have evacuated the first line. Their guns are being left in position for this purpose, and will be rendered useless after the infantry have passed back. 2 medical officers and about 20 Royal Army Medical Corps men have been detailed to remain at the casualty clearing station after all troops have left on the last night. Their duty is to attend to any wounded who have to be left to fall into the hands of the Turk, they, of course, giving themselves up as prisoners. If it is at all possible, pinnaces from one of the battleships will be ready to take them off, provided there are no wounded. Their tents are being lined with sandbags as protection against bullets. The Turk will not shell them. December 14th. The time gets nearer, yet the aspect of the beaches does not change. Shelling is about the same, but getting rather bad at odd but fortunately rare intervals. The days are now lettered, but the letter of each day is secret to all but a very few. All we know is that when the last night does arrive, it will be a Z night. I have a shrewd idea that today is either W or V day, so that the time is near. It will be hard luck if I collide with a shell now, after dodging them all these months. What of the schemes for evacuating the first line when all those in rear are clear away? The line for the last few nights will be very thinly held by us. The second and third lines are thickly wired with barbed wire in front, which stands in fences 8 feet high. At intervals there are passages through these fences to allow us to pass through on our way to and from the line. On the last night these passages will be closed, and the only way to get through will be by barbed wire gates across the few roads. Officers will be on duty at these gates, and they will have fixed thereon telephonic communication to the beaches. The final evacuation of the front line will be carried out as is the present daily evacuation of troops, keeping to a strict program. The officer in charge of the last party down a certain road will report his unit and name to the officer in charge of the gate. This will be checked by the list which the officer will have with him of the last parties down, and if correct, the officer, who will then know that the last troops have passed through, will telephone this information to the beach, close and bar the gate, and proceed with the party to the next line, and himself report to the officer at that gate, where the same procedure will follow, and so on to the beaches, the only way by which is by the roads. After the last parties have passed through the last line, then those on the beaches will know that all have passed safely through, and that there are 3 lines of trenches thickly protected by barbed wire between the beaches and the enemy. The last parties to leave will be hurried on board the waiting destroyers, trawlers, and ships. The skeleton framework of the supply depot, the remaining stores which have been unavoidably left, will be set ablaze by the igniting of petrol-sodden hay. The remaining officers will make a bolt for the few remaining pinnaces. That is the scheme. The British population of Suvla daily dwindles away, unbeknown to the ignorant Turk. Ammunition and ordnance and all manner and kind of stores and equipment are daily disappearing into the holds of the waiting ships. These ships are not more numerous than the ships which have lain in the bay in the safety of the boom since August 6th, so that from their presence our plot is not given away. To the enemy our daily life appears the same, and he gives us our daily ration of shells, now of good quality and effective, and no doubt is laughing at us with the memory of the recent awful storm and the coming blizzards of a rigorous winter. If all goes well, if the well-laid schemes of our General Staff gang not agley, and no bloody rearguard action is forced upon us, it will be our turn to laugh in a few days. Tonight the wind has changed to the northwest. We may hoodwink the Turks, but not the mighty elements, and we pray that they will be our allies in our task. If our enemies, then we must give ourselves up in unconditional surrender, hoping for no mercy. Carver has just arrived from Helles on a mission quite apart from the scheme of evacuation. To our surprise, he is unaware that we are evacuating, and tells us that all at Helles are also ignorant of the upcoming event. No preparation of any kind is being made to evacuate Helles. He leaves again tonight back for Helles. The 86th Brigade and part of Division Headquarters are now moving off. I go to Y forming up post, just at the foot of our gully, and view the scenes there. The beaches have been shelled this afternoon. If they but drop a few over this evening, they cannot fail to claim many victims. Shadowy figures march up in perfect order and form up. Roll calls are made, sharp commands issued, stand at ease, stand easy, whereupon the figures talk, lean on their rifles, or lie down resting on the ground. Elphinstone is going off with his brigade, as he is their supply officer. I make him up a box of the plentiful medical comforts, including a few bottles of champagne for his brigade headquarters, to feast on while on board. I say goodbye to many friends in the brigade, as the order to move down is telephoned up from West Beach to the officer at the receiver attached to Y Post. Troops are called to attention, and in 2 deep they march down towards the beach, entering the safety of the trench that has been dug there, pass in safety behind the mounds of earth and the small rocky promontory, and file along the pier in single file, up a gangway onto a small paddle steamer, which sails out to the bay to the waiting ship. I listen to the chatter of the Dublin Fusiliers, to their philosophical comments on the situation, and feel glad for them that they are seeing the last of this damnable campaign. One of them has heard on good authority, and tells his friend, that they are bound for Aldershot. I leave them and walk back. No shells come over. Inland I hear the steady crack, crack, crack of the rifles. I turn into bed. Our brigade, the old 88th, alone of the division, is left in the line. December 15th. The wind is cold and blowing steadily from the northeast, yet the sea is not too rough for the getting off of stores. Lord Howard de Walden and General Percival, the Brigadier of the 86th Brigade, which embarked last night, are now on the beach as part of the regulating staff of the evacuation program. This staff, controlled by General Fanshawe, is almost as efficient as could be, with the result that the last stage of the evacuation is working like clockwork. Every man is accounted for. No man can leave before his time. No man should be left behind. Commander Unwin, who gained the Victoria Cross at the landing of April 25th for gallantry on V Beach, is in charge of conveyance of stores, animals, and men from the beaches to the ships, and night and day he is on duty on the piers. He stands over 6 feet and is broad in proportion, with the typical clean-shaven face of a sailor, and with a voice that roars orders through a megaphone, causing those who are ordered to jump about a good deal quicker on their jobs than they probably would do otherwise. I go down on the beach with a staff officer this morning after a few good morning shells have crashed on the beach roads and on the mounds of earth, and we call at the embarkation office, in a sandbagged house dug and built in the cover of a rock. There we find a few of the staff hard at work. The weather has been kind, and we are up to time with the program. We talk to 2 yeomanry officers who are on the evacuation staff. Everything is working perfectly, and I feel confident that we shall succeed in evacuating long before the Turk discovers our absence. Ships, when loaded with supplies and passengers, proceed to Mudros Harbor, where they are unloaded quickly, coming back the following night. No ships pass to and fro between here and Lemnos during the day, so that every morning that the Turk wakes up he notices no extra ships lying anchored, or the absence of the ships departed. The view of the shipping line in the bay inside the boom appears unchanged, as is the case of the beaches day by day. Regularly at dusk we go up to the Commander Royal Engineers nullah and issue rations from the reserve supplies there. Tonight we issue to the 88th Brigade only, and the work in consequence is quickly finished. The distance to the line is now short for the Army transport carts to take the rations up, for the best part of their journey is made empty, namely from the lines at the end of the promontory to our dump in the Commander Royal Engineers nullah. The journey back to their lines from the trenches is now made with empty carts, for all forward stores have been evacuated. There is no doubt that the Turk hears the carts approaching to the various cookhouses, for the carts rattle and the various parts of the harness clank loudly. Their sound is certain to be heard by him in his front line, for the nights here are so still. The Turk fires over toward the direction where he knows the roads lie, hoping to claim a casualty in mule or man. The 2 late Brigade headquarters are now uninhabited and closed, and whoever opens the doors of the several dugouts will be blasted immediately into eternity by bombs attached to the doors, seats, and cupboards. I see my brigade close by our dump in the Commander Royal Engineers nullah, and the atmosphere is cheery and full of confidence. Crack, 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 the rifles in front sing away. I hear 1 bullet pass, but the few bullets that reach this nullah are spent in force and drop harmlessly to the ground. Major Bailey, as cheery as ever, calls in our dugout when we arrive back, and we give him a good dinner of tinned roast fowl and champagne before he embarks with his field company. I go down again to Y Formation Post, and the scene there is the same as last night. Shadowy columns of men arriving in good order, lying down to await telephonic instructions to proceed to the beach. The beaches are full of hundreds and hundreds of men moving in single file along the piers and up the gangways and on board ship, while at little coves nearby, lighters are busy feverishly loading with animals, baggage, and remaining equipment. December 16th. Still no change on the beaches. Still the same fitful white puffs of Turkish shrapnel over the wooded lowland. Still the ration allowance of Turkish high explosive onto the beaches. And yet tons and tons of stores and equipment have left, and thousands of men from here are now safe in the camps at Mudros. A light northeast breeze is blowing with bright sunshine, and it is very clear. The conditions for our scheme are perfect. Our second line is now crowded with troops who remain well under cover during the day. Water for these is a difficulty, as there are no wells close handy, and it has to be carted up to them daily from the beach. 5 80-gallon tanks are fixed in position along this line, which are kept full of water as an emergency. Our front line is but thinly held, and all who pass between this second and front line must keep to the roads, for the country is now freely strewn with all devices of trip bombs, which await the Turk should he discover what we are up to immediately after we evacuate the front line and come on to give us battle. As yet I am certain that he knows nothing, so well are our evacuation staff working. And the last night, Z night, is approaching very near now. I believe tonight is W night. I issue as usual and visit brigade headquarters. Take a stroll on the beaches after dinner to view the scene of men and animals quietly disappearing off the land that we have shed so much blood in conquering. And then I go off to bed. End of section 21. Gallipoli Diary. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sue Anderson. Gallipoli Diary by John Graham Gillam. Section 22. December 17th to 31st, 1915. December 17th. Early this morning we have showers of rain, which are followed by a southerly breeze, quickly blowing them away. Brilliant sunshine makes the day quite hot. During the night I receive orders to issue 2 days' rations tonight to the 88th Brigade and the rest of the division, and afterwards to embark with all Army Service Corps details along with division headquarters. I am down on the beach in the afternoon getting our kits shipped off. At 5 o'clock the Turks opened fire with 2 guns onto the beaches and beach roads, and the first few caused casualties. The shells are first class and burst with a deafening crash. 1 gun is on Sari Bair, and the other is on the hills on the left of Anafarta. They continue until shortly after dusk, about 6:20 p.m. 5 minutes after, the beaches are alive with men once more, and the work of evacuation proceeds energetically. This bout of shelling makes us anxious, as it would appear that our plot has been discovered. I go up to Commander Royal Engineers dump and issue 2 days' rations to the 88th Brigade and the few remaining odd units. We leave the balance of the reserve supplies. They are too near the line to be burnt on the last night, and we leave them as a present of thanksgiving to our enemy, the Turk, who has played the game throughout the campaign. I say goodbye to the brigade and express the hope that I shall see them all safe and well in Egypt, where I believe we are going for a good rest and refitment. Nobody can deny that the 29th deserve it. I go back and have a last meal with Horn. Our camp will be deserted tomorrow, yet if an enemy airplane sails over, no change will be noted. Our dugouts are left standing intact. I, with the details, go down to Y forming up post, and there meet, as on previous nights, parties and companies of men arriving. I call the roll of my men, and am instructed by the Adjutant of the Commander Royal Engineers to fall my men in behind the Division Headquarters party when the order is telephoned up from West Beach. A wait of 3/4 of an hour. We hope no shells will arrive. Horn comes up to say goodbye to me. I wish him good luck, not envying him his wait of 48 hours. Tonight is X night. The order from the beach arrives. All are called to attention. We march off through the main supply depot, down into the trench, over the open space of West Beach along the pier. A short pause here of 10 minutes, and then, in single file, we pass up the gangway, over the sunken ships which act as a breakwater to the little harbour, and so on board a paddle steamer. In half an hour she is full. It is a lovely moonlight night. We steam out into the bay, come alongside a small steamer, and file on board her. I go up on deck and view the scene of Suvla Bay by moonlight. I can hear the crack of the rifles from inland, and also voices from the beaches. Now and again a torch is flashed as a lighter crunches upon the beach. With a soft swishing sound a lighter glides past us to some other ship. The whole bay and foreshore is bathed in moonlight, and as I look, all those 8 months of hardships, gloom, and danger pass in review before me. A feeling as of a great burden being lifted off my mind comes over me, and a sense of extreme gladness that at last the long-drawn horror is past. And what horror! Never again, I think to myself, never again. I look towards Anzac and notice that the whole sky is aflame. The stores are alight, probably a stack of supplies which has caught fire by mistake. And then, as I look, a curious mist arises, low at first, off the sea. As if with an invisible hand a cloudy cloak is slowly draped over the whole peninsula. First Suvla, then Anzac, and the coastline becomes blotted out, and I see now nothing but a grey mist. Suvla Bay and its horrors, its hopes and disappointments, are lost to my sight forever, for by the time the mist has dispersed the ship has moved away. December 18th. After a good night spent on the floor of the wardroom, lying on my British warm with my cap as a pillow, I wake up about 7 a.m., wondering where on earth I have got to. I hear that now delightful sound, the pulse of a ship's engines, and know with a happy feeling that I am sailing on a ship to the friendly waters of the harbour of Lemnos. No breakfast is to be had, for all troops, officers and men, except myself, have embarked with rations. Stupid of me to forget myself when it was my job to see that all troops went off with rations. I explore the ship and cage a topping breakfast of eggs and ham off one of the crew. I go into his cabin and eat it on the QT. At 12 o'clock Lemnos heaves in sight, and at 1 o'clock we enter the harbour. It is all but 5 months since I was here last, and the camps have doubled and trebled their size, and doubled and trebled their number. As we pass the French and British battleships, monitors and destroyers, the respective crews come to the sides of their ships and gaze with interest at us. But there is no demonstration. When I last passed these ships 5 months ago, the crews cheered us and cheered again as we passed out to war. Now they look on, gaze at us, and say nothing. It seems almost a reproval. We take up our moorings amongst other small ships which have come with troops from the peninsula, and after a brief delay are transferred with baggage to the Southland. Ah, this means sailing for Egypt probably. Egypt! It will be like sailing home. The Southland was the boat that was torpedoed early in September. I go and look at the damage that was done. A great hole was torn in one of her holds, and it was lucky that she was able to reach Lemnos, 50 miles away from the spot where she was hit. We learn that the 86th have passed to Hellas, and soon we are to follow. Good Lord! This is the unkindest cut of all. So we are not done with it yet. Well, I don't suppose the Turks will let us get off scot-free this time. I draw food for the men on board, and at 7:30 p.m. go down to dinner. The last time that I dined in this saloon was in those days in April, just before the original landing. The officers of the King's Own Scottish Borders were dining here then, and their bagpipes played them into dinner, many for the last time in their lives. We have a merry dinner party with champagne. After, I enjoy the luxury of a hot bath, and then turn in. December 19th. It is topping being on board a nice ship again, and back once more to civilization. I row round with the skipper in the morning to 1 or 2 ships in harbour, and after lunch go over in a pinnace with some officers to the shore, calling on the Aragon on the way, where General de Lisle and Colonel O'Hara join us. Firth, O'Hara, and I, on reaching the land, walk up to a village inshore and buy eggs. It is delightful being able to stretch one's legs without having to carry one's ears at the right engage, in expectancy of the whistle of the enemy shell. We have great fun purchasing eggs from old Greek ladies, 6 from one, 12 from another, and so on. When loaded up with them, we get back to the pier, on to a waiting pinnace, and so out to the Aragon, where O'Hara entertains us to tea. We learn that we are not to be on the peninsula long, only a matter of 3 weeks, and then we and the Royal Naval Division will be relieved and taken to Egypt. And so, the sooner we are back there to get it over, the better. We get back to the Southland and have a cheery dinner, which we make the most of. Tonight is Z night, and as we sit talking after dinner, we wonder how the work is proceeding. Last night everything went satisfactorily, no shelling, and news this morning shows the Turks have spotted no change. December 20th. Suvla is Turkish once more. All troops left without a casualty. The evacuation proceeded all day yesterday. The scenes on the beaches appeared as normal as ever. At nightfall, all stores that had been intended to be evacuated had been safely shipped. All that were left were the skeleton stacks of supplies waiting to be set alight, useless ordnance, and the supply of emergency ammunition. The beaches were shelled as usual in the day. Night fell, and those left on the beaches, except the evacuation staff, were hastened on to the waiting ships. At dusk, a few monitors and destroyers quietly slipped into the bay, standing by in readiness for a Turkish attack. The ration carts that were left were promptly shipped, not a mule being left. In fact, every hoof was safely embarked. Then began the last stage. In succeeding waves, the remaining troops fell back in perfect order to the forming up posts. In a steady stream they were hastened off onto the waiting ships, until at last the supreme moment arrived. The message was telephoned to the line that all troops behind those few men who were waiting a few yards from the unsuspecting Turk had left Suvla for good and all. Here and there a man fired his rifle as a farewell salute to our gallant enemy, but no man was permitted to fire without an order. With their boots wrapped in sandbags, they crept back, down the communication trenches, out onto the roads, past the first gate, which was immediately locked, the news of their passing being telephoned to the beaches. Past the second likewise, then the third, and then straight to the beaches, finally on board and hurried off with great dispatch when the evacuation staff knew from their statistics that Suvla Bay was free of every Britisher but themselves. Hastily, Army Service Corps officers run round the frameworks of the supply stacks in the depot with lighted torches, and quickly the supplies are ablaze. Then a rush is made to the waiting pinnaces, which merrily puff out to the battleships. Meanwhile, the officers detailed to wait at the casualty clearing station are picked up by pinnaces, for no rearguard action has been necessary. The Turk was lying ignorant of it all in his trenches, crack, crack, cracking his rifle. If he had only known! At last, not a living Britisher was left on Suvla or Anzac. Every dugout, nook and cranny was searched, and it was with great interest that the evacuation staff viewed the scene from the battleships as daylight broke. The fires burnt fiercely and quickly. Turkish shells came over as if to hasten the destruction of the fire. Complete success had been the reward of the excellent work of the staff. Still, the Turk did not know that we had left. He saw the tents of our hospitals standing, but the deserted appearance of the beaches must have made him wonder. The morning wore on. Puzzled, a few venturesome Turks peeped over the parapets of the trenches. Nothing happened. They climbed over the top, walked over no man's land into the deserted trenches, and the secret was discovered. We had evacuated, lock, stock, and barrel, under their very noses. Down the roads they came in small parties. A few muffled noises were heard, by which the watchers of this strange drama from the battleships knew that the bombs that we had laid cunningly were claiming victims, fighting our battles for us without our being on the field. And so they came to Lala Baba, and some German officers, with a characteristic insult to their brave ally, hoisted the German flag as a token of a German victory, though the honors of the day were with the Turk. He, however, had won not by beating us, but by our being beaten by nature, the impregnable fastness of the mountains of Suvla Bay and the Gallipoli winter storms. How a Turk could allow a German flag to be hoisted is beyond comprehension. One day Germany will fall shamefully to the dust in the eyes of her Oriental ally, and Turkey must beware of that day, on which she can expect no mercy. The last crowded ships arrive in Mudros Harbour. The shore becomes thronged with Australian troops, who, more fortunate than ourselves, are bound for Egypt, while we, after lunch, embark on the Partridge and sail off with our General once more for the Peninsula. It is a chilling, depressing voyage to Helles, a journey made by me now for the 3rd time. I hope it will be my luck to make it yet a 4th time, for that will be after the war. We have Emil off rations that we have brought with us. The boat is crowded with troops, and they do not seem very cheery. Night falls. At 8 o'clock we see in the distance the starlight sailing up and down inland on the peninsula, though it is hard to discern the outline of the shore. Soon the lights of a hospital ship are discernible ahead. Suddenly 2 flashes are seen, one after the other, from the Asiatic side. 2 booms of guns are heard about 15 seconds after, followed by 2 piercing shrieks, and the shells burst with a bright flash of flame on W Beach. And so we are in it once more. Shortly after we see the dim outline of the shore. We heave to and anchor off V Beach. After a wait of half an hour, lighters come alongside, on which we get and are towed to a pier running out from V Beach, which now, in addition to being protected from the strong currents of the Dardanelles by the River Clyde, is protected from the outer sea by a sunken French battleship, the Messina. In consequence, the water inside the pier is like a mill pond, while outside a heavy swell washes against the sides of the 2 ships. I am on V Beach once more. It does not seem to have altered much since I left on August 20th last, but appears perhaps more orderly than it was then. More light railways are about. Foley is there to meet us, and it is good to see him safe and well. Up to a fortnight ago, he tells me, it was very quiet on the peninsula. In fact, they have been playing football matches in the aerodrome, and on shore, in a large dugout, the band of the Royal Naval Division have been giving concerts. But lately 2 guns from Asia have been throwing over at odd intervals of the day 8-inch naval shells, and life on the beaches is becoming jumpy again. Also, some new guns have been placed in position on the slopes of Achi Baba, which have been worrying the rest camps further inland. He tells me that the Turkish ammunition had improved in quality. This was what we had found at Suvla, due to Bulgaria's entry into the war as our enemies, and the opening of the road from Germany to Constantinople. The war will not end before this road is cut by the Allies. We shall never succeed now in forcing the Straits, and so this road will never be cut in this manner. We must, however, hang on to this end of the peninsula, and I pity the troops who will be detailed for duty to do so through this winter. It will not be the 29th, for shortly we shall be leaving, and this time for good. 3 weeks, I think. 3 weeks only on W Beach, the bull's-eye of a target. C'est la guerre. As we march up onto the Helles Plateau, we notice fires burning in the distance up the coast of Suvla, the Suvla supply depot and other stacks still burning. On arrival on the high ground on the left of W Beach, looking inland, I turn into the same dugout which used to be our home in the early days of this round in circles campaign. Matthews is there to welcome me, and a new officer named Harris. As I turn in, I think of our old dugout at Suvla, now occupied in all probability by sleeping Turks. How strange! During the night I am awakened at intervals by loud explosions. Only Asia firing on W Beach at intervals. One bursts on the slopes of our cliff, and large lumps of earth fall on our tarpaulin roof. December 21st. I am awakened by a few shells bursting on the beach. After breakfast I meet our new commanding officer, Colonel Huskisson. I dined with him in Ritchie's dugout in May last, when he was officer commanding Main Supply Depot. I learned that the beaches get shelled now heavier than they were ever shelled before. During the morning I walk inland with Bell along the light railway system, which runs from the beaches and branches in several directions over the Helles Plateau, for a distance of about a mile. Mules pull small trucks up from the beach to the high ground behind the beach, where the mules are unhitched, and the trucks, with their own momentum, run down the plateau, which is on a gentle slope. Bell's idea is to have a supply depot at the end of the railway on the plateau, and to issue from there to horse transport, which will come up one wagon at a time. Should transport collect in any spot on this plateau, it immediately draws shell fire. I am struck by the way transport goes about in daylight and under observation from the enemy, certainly not in long convoys, but in single wagons or 2 or 3 together. Achi Baba looks more formidable than ever, and bleaker. In fact, the whole tip of the peninsula looks far more cheerless than when I was here last. A strong southerly wind is blowing this morning. This afternoon we have rain, and as night falls our rest trenches are sloughs of mud, for hardly any work appears to have been done on a system of drainage, and the men have no roofing whatever. In fact, at Helles, corrugated iron is practically nil, although at Suvla we did have a small supply. Do they honestly believe that they can hang on this tiny tip of land during the winter? Just beyond the end of the railway, the ground is thickly lined with camps, consisting of rest trenches. These now lead right up to the system of deep trenches forming our front line. Behind where I am standing at the end of the railway, at a distance of 300 yards, there stands a very large hospital of tents and huts. This could be destroyed utterly by Turkish shell fire in half an hour, yet it stands untouched. No large bodies of troops or transport are allowed to collect or pass near, of course, but small parties of 2 or 3 may pass by. Division headquarters is about 200 yards behind, dug in trenches. On their left is the West Coast Road overlooking the sea. The 87th are in the line and a part of the 86th, the remainder being in rest camp trenches. The 88th have, of course, not yet arrived. Our artillery are practically in the same positions that they were 6 months ago. December 22nd. It is quite calm now and a fine day. Thus we are given an opportunity of digging the mud out of the trenches and to work on a system of drainage. But we want roofing badly. Unlike V Beach, now a perfect harbour safe against almost any sea, W Beach at the first heavy swell becomes impossible for landing any supplies. Engineers are busy as usual on the piers, not on construction, but on the work of repairing the damage done by each spell of rough sea. The storm that we experienced at Suvla did not spend its fury on Helles, though they felt the outskirts of its force here. so much so that the flimsy piers off W Beach were almost washed away, and for the time we depended on the courtesy of our French allies to land stores and supplies on V Beach. No. 1 pier here, however, is fairly safe, for we have 2 small ships sunk at the end, set at an angle forming a breakwater, but they are too small to make the harbour as secure as the one at V Beach. We should have sunk ships 6 times as large. All along the shore off W Beach, lighters lie 3 deep, washed up by past spells of rough weather. The scheme of having our divisional supply dump inland has fallen through, as it is too near Division Headquarters and would be sure to draw shell fire, which is becoming more and more frequent and effective. We draw at dusk from main supply depot, and at night issue from our divisional dump in an unsafe spot on the far side of the back of W Beach, having to be careful not to show too many lights. Asia keeps us on the qui vive all day, and too much activity on the beach will always draw a spell of shelling. A cloudy evening. At 11 p.m. the 88th Brigade arrive. December 23rd. It is a fine cold day. We now walk about on the beach with our ears always listening for the sound of a gun from Asia or Achi Baba, upon hearing which we get ready to fling ourselves to the ground or dive into a dugout. I go along to the headquarters of the 86th and 88th Brigades, both built in the side of a cliff just this side of X Beach, and almost opposite our division headquarters. Their dugouts are delightful, cozy little houses. They are practically safe from shell fire, and form a great contrast to divisional headquarters, dug a little way to the right in trenches which are in full view of the enemy and in danger of a shell dropping plumb onto them at any moment. The day drags wearily away. There is nothing much to do but bookwork, making up accounts, and visits to the main supply depot. It is an extraordinary thing, but almost every time I stroll over to the supply depot from our office on the cliff, over comes a shell, either from a howitzer on Achi or Quick Dick from Asia. I prefer the howitzer. It gives you a chance to quickly look round for the nearest dugout and dive in, whereas Quick Dick, with its boom, whiz, bang, is on you before you can count 2, and leaves you almost gasping, wondering that you are still standing alive instead of flying through the air in little bits. Each day victims are claimed. I thought my quartermaster sergeant had got it proper today, but I saw him do a marvelous head dive behind a mound protecting dug-in stables, which saved him. It makes everybody living on the beach very bad-tempered. At night they drop them over at intervals, but we are one too many for Asia by night. One can distinctly see the flash of the gun, and can count 23 slowly before the shell arrives. The French are very clever over dodging these night shells from Asia. A man perched up on a stack of hay watches Asia intently. He sees a flash, blows loudly on a trumpet, and everybody gets to cover like rabbits. Result, remarkably few casualties. Of course, the flash of the gun does not tell whether the shell is addressed to V Beach or W Beach, and one cannot fail to at times be amused, in spite of the grimness of it all, for the lookout man on V Beach might see the flash and give a mighty blast on his trumpet, whereupon all rush for cover, and 23 seconds later the shell swishes over, not to V Beach at all, but to W Beach. The Turkish gunners appear to have their tails very much up, no doubt through the evacuation of Suvla and Anzac, and enemy airmen are very daring, swooping right over our lines and at times dropping an odd bomb or two. Men and transport move about as freely as ever though, which is such a contrast to Suvla, though of course our line being further inland than it was at Suvla, the enemy have difficulty in reaching the transport with shrapnel. If not, probably our transport would not be so reckless. The roads at the foot of the cliff can no longer be used, having been made impassable by being washed right away in parts. December 24th. It is delightful weather, and we continue our life, preparing the figures and accounts to draw the rations at night, and arranging for their issue. Usual shelling all day. In the afternoon, as I walk across the plateau to Division Headquarters, an enemy aeroplane comes swooping over. I am near a party of men marching, and hear the pop-pop of a machine gun. Almost immediately after, I hear the swish of bullets and see them kick up the dust round about. At first I can't make it out. Then it dawns on me that the daring aviator is actually firing on the troops near me. I notice that instead of a cross painted on his machine, he has a square, which is the sign of the Bulgarian Flying Corps. I go back to tea with Farquhar in his lines, dug-in trenches on the cliff side over Corps Headquarters, situated further round the cliff from our dugouts. As we are at tea, 4 enemy machines sweep over to W Beach, and shortly after I hear the sound of dropping bombs as they circle round and round. Our anti-aircraft guns, not plentiful, endeavor to bring them down, but they circle round unconcerned, and having discharged about 30 bombs, swing round and make back for their lines, keeping out to sea off the coast. I get back to the beach and find that their bombs have caused many casualties. To my great sorrow, I learn that Cox of the Essex has been hit clean with one, and also a friend of the same regiment, both being killed instantly. They had come down from the rest camp to purchase some luxuries for the canteen for Christmas Day. After sticking it all this time, to be killed like this, just 2 weeks before the time when the division is to be relieved for good, is really far worse luck than met Algy Wood of the same regiment. And now there are no more of the original Essex officers left. It has been rough today, especially at Imbros, which has a very exposed harbour, and in consequence it has been possible to issue only a very small percentage of fresh meat. It is bad luck, for tomorrow is Christmas Day, and I should like to have given the division a full issue of fresh meat. However, a consignment of Christmas puddings has arrived from Lady Hamilton's fund and will be issued. We were promised many other luxuries, such as oranges and other fruits, but these have not arrived, owing to the difficulty of transport by sea, and so, for the majority of the men of the division and all troops inshore, bully beef will take the place of the customary roast beef and turkey. December 25th. It is very beautiful weather. We do the best we can for the troops in the way of supplies, but it has to be bully beef and Christmas puddings for their dinners. The Turks are unusually quiet. I believe they know that it is our Christmas Day. We have a Christmas dinner in our dugout and a very cheery time, one of the cheeriest Christmas dinners I have ever had. Parcels from home pooled help to make a good spread, and one can make excellent rissoles from bully beef. December 26th, 27th, 28th, and 29th. Visits to Brigade and to Division Headquarters and journeys to and from our dugout office and main supply depot are the order of the day. Usual shelling, far more trying than any we have ever experienced before. Enemy airplanes now and again try to come over, but are driven back by our planes. Cold but fine. We have to send in an estimate of transport required to cart baggage back from battalions to beaches. This no doubt means we are off shortly. I hope so, as I am getting fed up with this diary. But it seems strange to be making plans to get off again when we have only just arrived back. December 30th. Today we hear the news secretly that we are evacuating Helles altogether. They are having a conference at Corps Headquarters this morning on the plans. I am sent for by the engineer officer in charge of works on the beach, and he questions me closely on the plans that were followed at the last evacuation. But I can tell him little or nothing beyond what I personally observed. I am afraid that we shall not be able to get away supplies and stores so easily as we were able to at Suvla, and quantities will have to be left, for the beaches are under close observation from Yenisher and Kumkale, and now that we have already hoodwinked them once, the second evacuation will have to be done very carefully. Therefore, our only chance of getting away stores is by night, and animals, guns, and personnel must come first. The first thing, therefore, is to get up forward supplies in sufficient quantities to last out the remaining days, and I receive orders to get these up for the 87th and 88th Brigades, for again we are to be last off. I expected this second evacuation. Nearly everybody expected it. We have been told that 9th Corps would relieve 8th Corps, but to those of us who experienced the Suvla storm, the idea of hanging on here after Suvla and Anzac had been evacuated was impossible to consider. But this evacuation, we think, will be a very different matter, with the Turks expecting us to endeavor to make it. Transport will be the difficulty during these last few days, but fortunately the tramway comes in handy tonight in getting up rations to the 86th and 88th Brigades, and we manage successfully. We draw the rations from the main supply depot in bulk, apportion them out to units, and load them on the trucks on the line in the center of the depot itself. Mules then pull them to the slope, down which they run of their own accord to the plateau, with men acting as brakesmen. Those trucks which have to be pulled further inland are pulled by mules up a line which runs still nearer to the trenches. The rations are offloaded on arrival at their destination and manhandled over their remaining journey. By this means much more horse transport is cut out, which can in a few days be evacuated. But before then this transport must be used solely in getting back surplus kit. We put up the first batch of the reserve supplies. An arduous night, and we get to bed in the small hours of the morning. All day we had intervals of howitzers from Achi and Asia's shells. Not much longer now, thank God. December 31st. The last day of a damnable year. Honors in favor of the enemy. Luck all against us. But our turn will come before another year is out. In the morning the Turks heavily shell our front line reserve areas, and Division Headquarters, of course, being only just in rear, gets it badly. All day the beaches suffer. Life on the beaches is like a game of musical chairs. Instead of sitting down on a chair when the music stops, you promptly fling yourself behind cover when a shell arrives. I am a perfect tumbler now, and after the war will give exhibitions of the many different antics that one performs when dodging shells. A New Year's dinner as cheery as the Christmas dinner, but broken by visits to the main supply depot to send off the rations by tram, and then to bed. End of section 22. Gallipoli Diary. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sue Anderson. Gallipoli Diary by John Graham Gillam. Section 23, January 1st to 15th, 1916, and Epilogue. January 1st. Today is New Year's Day. At this time last year, this peninsula was as peaceful a part of the world as one could find in any neutral country, though its rulers were allies of our chief enemies. Today, a year after, we are nearing the fall of the curtain on the final act of one of the greatest tragedies of history. The curtain of the first act was run up on a scene beautiful and romantic in its setting 8 months ago, which changed as the play developed to scenes of gallant endeavor and death in all its nakedness. The final act, the tragic last scene of defeat without disgrace, is full of sadness, and the great audience, although held spellbound watching and waiting, will be full of relief when the curtain drops for good. It is strange to think, as I walk about once more on W Beach, that Suvla and Anzac no longer harbor British ships or house British troops, and that Turks now walk unmolested in our late trenches and shelter themselves at night in our late dugouts. In a few days now, Turks will be sitting in the place in which I am writing these notes. They are welcome, for our attempts to open their gates have failed. We have lost the game, but we have not been beaten by the Turks. they are no match for our troops. We have been beaten by nature, or the geographical fastness of this impregnable peninsula, and the storms of winter. The new year is heralded in on W Beach by the shells of a big howitzer on the left shoulder of Achi Baba, bursting with a deafening crash on the high ground of the beach, throwing large jagged splinters within a radius of 200 yards. When such a shell bursts, all within that radius drop flat to earth or dive into a dugout. I am sure that people living further inland or in the trenches, if they have not lived on the beach, do not realize the great strain on the nerves that work under steady, effective shell fire is on this beach, cooped up as we are in such a small space, which is all a target, not to say the chief target, of the Turkish gunners. The 29th Army Service Corps men are sticking it well. I think they guess that we are evacuating and are therefore cheery. Issuing by day, as in the early days, is now out of the question. We issue at dusk, and even then in danger of a shell in our depot. But the Army Service Corps, or the Army Safety Corps as it is termed by many in France, must never cease doing its job, for a man in the front line is hungry 3 times a day. As Senior Supply Officer, my job now is to see that the 4 supply officers' indents are satisfied in full, namely the supply officers of the 86th, 87th, 88th Brigades, and the Divisional Artillery. I must get the food ready at our depot for the night's issue for each group, out of which the 4 service officers must see that their troops and animals get their full ration. Their respective jobs are far more trying than is mine now, for the difficulties of getting the supplies from the beach to the troops have increased 100-fold. The main supply depot is still in the same spot as in the days of May, and there they must see that my indents are satisfied. Now they are drawing on their reserve, and as in the case of the evacuation of Suvla, they are issuing from the inside of the large stacks of supplies, for to the Turk these stacks must not appear to grow smaller. The outside walls must be kept standing, and when the time comes the depot officers will set them ablaze with hay and petrol, and long before the Turk can reach the beaches they should be raging furnaces. The main supply depot office is still in the same place as of old, built out of supply boxes. Several times it has been blown down by a Turkish shell, and why it has not been shifted I cannot think. More shells are bursting daily round this depot during these days than burst in a week of June on the whole of W Beach. If the Turks then had half the artillery they have now, I do not think that we would be here today. Smart, the depot supply officer, who was wounded in August and who is now back, sitting in the same old place, holds up his ruler to me this morning, the same ruler which was the stakes of the bet I had with him in the early days, that Achi Baba would be taken by June 30th, and says with a smile, "This ruler is still mine, and Achi Baba still belongs to Turkey." Outside, Achi Baba looks more forbidding than ever, like the head of a huge vulture waiting to spring. Howitzer shells are dropping along the road, and as I want to go up to the 86th and 88th Brigade headquarters with Horn, we go along the cliff's edge by the Greek camp, still in the same place. The 2 Brigade headquarters are in a delightful spot, dug in on the side of the cliff just this side of X Beach. I have a chat with General Williams and Sinclair Thompson. I enjoy going there. It is absolutely off the target, though as things are now one would think that there could be no spot on this tiny tip of land where one could live at all for long. Back for lunch. At 3 o'clock we are shelled badly in our quarter by howitzers from the hill and by Asia's Quick Dick, which is on you before you can duck, almost. General Birdwood has been here and had a look round. As before mentioned, the 29th are to be last. It is rather a lot to ask of the 86th and 88th after that storm and the strain of one evacuation, but it shows General Headquarters put a great value on us. Up to midnight I am at the main supply depot drawing the remainder of reserve supplies for 6 days for the division, which are being put up in Leith Walk and Clapham Junction respectively for the 87th and 88th Brigades. As in the case of the evacuation at Suvla, the 86th Brigade leaves shortly. Officers and men on W Beach are falling sick fast with the continual strain of shelling, and in view of the evacuation are being sent off at once. There are 1 or 2 cases of men losing their reason. January 2nd. The sea was very rough last night, and in consequence the evacuation was very much delayed. We are now being subjected to very severe shelling. From 3 o'clock yesterday to 9 o'clock this morning, 3 howitzers, 2 from behind Krithia and 1 on the right shoulder of Achi, have been throwing big, high explosive shells over to us on the beaches steadily. This is the severest spell on record, and it is evident that they are expecting us to go soon and are making it as hard as possible. Afterwards we were shelled in jerks to midday. At 7 o'clock tonight Horn and I go up to Krithia Nullah or Clapham Junction. It is very dark and the road is pockmarked with shell holes. I miss the familiar landmark of the white pillars. I remember now that they told me while I was at Suvla that they had been demolished by our engineers. We have a forward reserve dump at Clapham Junction, which we start eating into tomorrow. 88th Brigade Headquarters is just nearby, dug in trenches, and on calling there we are invited to dinner. We have a Christmas pudding which is brought in alight with brandy. It seems strange following this old custom in a dugout, with bullets zipping over outside, and within 800 yards of the Turks. Coming out of the dugout onto the road, I notice bullets flying about much freer than usual, the Turks being more energetic over their practice of firing their rifles at night than they ever were before. All the time as we walk back, we hear the Turkish howitzers sending over their consignment of high explosives to W Beach. After 10 minutes' walk we hear a shell coming bang at us, firing at a battery close by, but it is a small dud and it goes phut into the ground. As we approach nearer and nearer to W Beach, we hear their hows whining away overhead. They sound so harmless and seem to take quite a time sailing through the air, but the sound of them crashing on the beach rather inclines us to slacken our pace. On arriving the main supply depot, however, we quicken our pace and, passing through it, arrive at the wood stacks, when we hear one of their whiners sailing over. Quickly we duck behind the wood as it bursts short of the supply depot. We get up and walk briskly to our dugout, and just as we descend the steps on the cliff side we hear another. We dive into Hislop's dugout precipitously as it bursts with a crash 40 yards behind us. Afterwards a pinnace alongside No. 1 pier is afire, set ablaze by a direct hit from a shell. Bed, and we go to sleep hearing the shells explode in various parts of the beach at short intervals. Fortunately these shells do not reach the water's edge and cannot impede the final stage of the evacuation. It is only Asia that upsets this. January 3rd. Some of the staff of the main supply depot have now left. Last night some animals, including the Army transport cart mules, were evacuated. They are led, coaxed and whipped onto the lighters from the piers. The lighters are then towed out to the waiting ships, which have come in under the cover of darkness, and the animals are slung on board. It is strenuous work for those detailed for the job, especially with a heavy swell. The personnel are sent off from V Beach, and they do not waste time hanging about the open spaces of the beach, but make for the cover of the River Clyde and the fort as soon as possible. The man with the trumpet is kept busy giving warning against Asia's shells. Weekly men are being hurried off. Surplus kit, office records also. Forward reserves of ammunition are being placed in the Eski lines, which run across the peninsula, and each man and machine gun has a reserve of small ammunition. Also a reserve is kept on the beaches. On the last day our division will have about 3,000 men left. We start eating into our 7 days' forward reserves today. The Egyptian shepherds who provided meat for the Drabbies of the Mule Corps with their sheep have left today. The casualties from shellfire are becoming more and more frequent on the beaches now. The 86th Brigade leave tonight, and the balance of those men who were prevented from getting off by the rough sea of last night. In fact, many men had to leave by daylight this morning, risking the Turks' observation. The French try a very clever ruse by lighting a stack of hay, which, smouldering only, causes heavy columns of smoke to drift over Sed el Bahr and away out over the Straits, which enables them to ship quite a lot of animals under its screen in broad daylight. Enemy aeroplanes are busy trying to get over to the beaches all day, but are successfully kept at bay by our anti-aircraft guns and aeroplane patrols. A strong wind is blowing from the northeast, and it looks like a change in the weather, causing anxiety to us all. As usual, all today and continuing tonight, the beaches and their approaches have been heavily shelled. Our monitors have been energetically replying. January 4th. This morning we have intermittent shelling, in twos and threes and in fits and starts. Just before lunch, while standing at the door of our dugout on the top of the cliff, I see a destroyer come right inshore, and swinging round quickly she anchors. I see a group of naval and military officers on deck, who climb down the companion into a pinnace which takes them to No. 1 Pier. I turn my glasses on to them, and see that the party consists of General Birdwood, the Army Commander, an Admiral, 2 naval and 2 Army officers. They slowly walk along the pier, and I cannot help feeling anxious for them, for Asia has put one of her beauties close to No. 1 Pier a short while before. They turn to the left and walk along the road at the foot of the cliffs. Just as they are passing immediately beneath our bivvy, 2 howitzer shells burst with a deafening report on the beach. General Birdwood never turns his head, but I notice that the 2 other officers following behind look anxiously over their shoulders. They go up to 8th Corps Headquarters, and after lunch a conference is held. Afterwards, General Birdwood sends over to the Mule Cart Corps on the high ground between W and V Beach for an old native officer whom he has known for many years in India. He is a fine old man and a splendid type of the loyal native soldier. Of course he was overcome with delight at meeting the General once more, who told him to assure all the native drivers and their non-commissioned officers with the Mule Corps that our evacuation was a strategical move, made for the best, and not in any way to be interpreted as a disaster. The native mind is so different from our own, and though they are as loyal as any of our troops, one feels anxious to prevent them from losing their confidence. As a result of the conference, the progress of the stages of the evacuation must be speeded up. Personnel and animals must at all costs be dealt with first, and as the sands are running low, it will now be necessary to begin evacuating animals by day and risk the shelling. This morning the sea has been dead calm and perfect for our purpose, but the navies say that they expect a southerly gale. We, of course, dread a southerly gale. It is a very trying and anxious time, and the shelling is now almost continuous. Certainly only a few guns are turned onto the beaches, but sufficient to upset and impede our work. 6 shells may come over from the howitzers on Achi at 10, 3 from Asia at 11, 4 from Achi at 11:30, then from 12 to 1 probably 20 from Achi and Asia, all onto the camps and depots in the confined space of W Beach. All the while casualties occur. As a contrast, the evacuations of Suvla and Anzac were child's play to that of Helles. The monitors are busy replying, and I think cause their guns to stop now and again. All the afternoon the beach gets shelled. Asia now and again puts some very nasty ones over near our bivouac, and once we all had to take cover in 2 tunnels in the side of the cliff to our left, where they have been quarrying for stone. At 8 p.m. a gale springs up, and the embarkation is greatly hampered. They found it impossible to embark the mules on the transport when the lighters arrived alongside. One lighter, loaded with mules, carts, and drivers, breaks away and quickly goes drifting out to sea towards Asia, becoming lost in the darkness of the night. All night we get shelled every quarter of an hour. January 5th. It is very windy and the sea rough. Yet the evacuation of animals proceeds by day as well as by night, regardless of whether we are seen or not. But a large number of animals will, I am afraid, have to be left, and in consequence will be killed on the last day. I do not know which day Z Day is, but I hear that it has been postponed in consequence of the rough sea. The shelling is as bad as ever on the beaches. Now, in addition to guns on Achi and on the Asiatic side opposite Morto Bay, a 4-gun Turkish battery comes into position by Kumkale and manages to reach the water's edge of W Beach and V Beach with shrapnel, but a Monitor quickly getting onto it very soon silences it. No enemy gun can ever be in position on this point for long. Asia gives us a bad time in the afternoon and puts some nasty ones near our bivouac, and again we have to take refuge in the tunnel. Monitors are busy bombarding Achi, and a cruiser with an airplane up spotting for her is hard at work trying to find the Asiatic gun. Enemy airplanes as usual make persevering endeavors to come over W Beach, but each time are driven off by our airmen. Our anti-aircraft guns never hit anything. The enemy aircraft now try to fly over W Beach by approaching it from the sea, and many an exciting chase and duel is daily witnessed between our planes and theirs, ours always holding mastery of the air. The sea is getting calmer, and at night an odd shell comes over at intervals of half an hour or so. The lighter loaded with the mules and their drivers, which broke adrift yesterday owing to the rough sea, drifted fortunately onto Rabbit Islands, and her freight was picked up by a Monitor. January 6th. A lovely calm morning. The shelling has quieted down considerably. I think the Monitors have been frightening the Turkish gunners somewhat. Also, Asia is not worrying us, thank God, and yesterday's bombardment from the cruiser has probably done a lot of good. The sea is like glass, and the conditions are perfect for evacuation. The same policy is being followed in getting the last troops off on Z night as was followed at Suvla, but quantities of material, ordnance, and Royal Engineers stores will have to be left. The reserve ammunition in the keeps on the beaches on the last night will be blown up just before we leave. Enemy airplanes are over in the morning, showing great daring and keeping our airmen very busy. The beaches are crowded with mules, wagons, and fatigue parties hard at work at loading the lighters. There is no attempt at concealing what we are doing, but the Turk does not know which night is our last, and if we can manage to keep him in ignorance, then we can get off the last night without a rearguard action being fought, for John Turk does not like leaping over the top. Our Monitors, destroyers, and 2 cruisers keep the Turkish artillery much quieter than they were a few days ago, though at intervals they give us a very bad time on the beaches. A large number of personnel go off, including the 29th Division train with all their animals. Only myself, the adjutant, and 1 or 2 other officers and a handful of men are left to stand by in case the last day is delayed and troops require food. At present all on shore are rationed up to next Tuesday night. All the Greeks have left. January 7th. It is another beautiful morning, and the wind is in the northeast. We had some rain in the night, and in consequence the ground is rather muddy. All transport is now under the control of the 8th Corps Transport Depot. The shooting of those animals which it will not be possible to get off tonight will be begun and finished off tomorrow, and all vehicles left will be destroyed. This morning I walk up with Hislop to Division Headquarters. As we pass the stationary hospital, we see a cluster of mules wandering about, grazing on the scanty grass that is still growing in odd patches on the plateau. We hear the whistle of a shell, which proves a very small one and a dud, and which falls in the middle of them with a phut. They jump about a bit, and then calmly go on smelling for grass. Soon after another follows, also a dud. Evidently the Turkish gunner who has fired is a sportsman, and has made a bet with another that he will get a bullseye first shot. Soon after we hear the whine overhead of the howitzer shells, traveling seemingly to W Beach, fired in grim earnest, and not as a sporting shot, like the 2 duds at the mules. Looking at the gunnery from the Turkish gunners' point of view, it must have been all through this campaign a sort of series of field days for them, with their guns in position on commanding heights and with the targets nearly always open sights and on the lowlands. It is fortunate for us that only lately they have been receiving regular supplies of good ammunition. If they had had the artillery that the Germans had before Ypres, 24 hours on any single day throughout the 8 months that we have been here would have turned the campaign in favor of Turkey, and meant utter defeat and unconditional surrender for us. As we are therefore at the end of it all, and shall soon once more hand back to Turkey the remaining insignificant few acres of ground that we had captured and held after so much gallantry, endurance, and bloodshed, we must be thankful and congratulate ourselves that we are disentangled from the quagmire with our army intact. I may have spoken too soon, but if we are as fortunate as we were at Suvla, we can disappear in a night, although the enemy knows we are going. We expect him to attack shortly to test our strength. If we hold him and inflict losses on him, that will keep him quiet for a day or so. During these days we have our great chance to evacuate without loss and with our army intact. We get very busily shelled in the afternoon, several from Asia bursting within a few yards of our office, and one actually at the mouth of the tunnel, which was crowded with men taking cover. While this is going on, the enemy make a concentrated bombardment on a part of our front line held by the 13th Division and a part of the 87th Brigade. It lasts continuously from 3:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. and caused about 150 casualties. At the end they made half-hearted attempts to leave their trenches to attack ours, but the few small parties that had the bravery to get out into no man's land were stopped dead by our machine gun fire, and the show petered out. Now therefore is our chance, either tonight or tomorrow. This afternoon's attack was probably made to test our strength, and as they suffered as much as we did, if not more, they will pause a while before attacking again. After this attack finished, the shelling on the beaches almost entirely ceased, and when night fell I was able in peace to start a job which proved very tedious, namely of putting up rations, ammunition, and water in petrol cans into a dugout on W Beach, where it would be useful in case of a rearguard action. The filling of the petrol cans is the tedious part of the job, the cans having to be let down by rope into the reservoir, which lies 20 yards from our dugout on the top of the cliff. While I am in the middle of this job, an order from 8th Corps Headquarters comes that I am to leave with all the Army Service Corps details tonight. As I have already received an order from Division Headquarters to go off tomorrow night, I reply that I am sending the men with the remaining officers and am going with Division Headquarters tomorrow. I get 2 gallons of water, some bully, biscuits, and cheese put in my dugout. I send all my kit off with my servant, who places some hay on the floor for my bed for this, my last night, and go back to finish the job I am on. Tomorrow will be monotonous, waiting for the evening with nothing to do, but I have a good book to read and plenty of tobacco, and the day will soon pass. I am to go off at 6 p.m. At 10 p.m. a written order comes down from 8th Corps that I am to go off tonight with the others, for tomorrow is Z night, and the beaches must be cleared as far as possible of non-combatant details. I go to 8th Corps Signals and telephone Division Headquarters, who say I can go. I finish the job of putting the water in cans in the keep at 12 midnight and go back to my dugout. All have left except 5 men. 2 of them landed with me on W Beach on the first day. January 8th. It is now the beginning of Z Day, and we 3 stand on W Beach waiting orders to go on No. 1 Pier. As we stand in the heavy sand, my thoughts immediately go back to the night of April 25th, where in the same place as I am now standing, we were laboring carrying boxes of supplies up the beach. I feel as if I have gone round in a complete circle. This is what has happened with the Gallipoli campaign. It has indeed gone round in a complete circle. The beach is alive with troops, and animals are being feverishly embarked. About 200 have been shot tonight, though, and some men actually cried as they performed that horrid task. Fortunately, there is little shelling. One now and again bursts on the high ground of the beach. A military landing officer comes along the pier and instructs us to file along on board. We pass up the pier, up a gangway, over one of the sunken ships, and onto a small ship moored on the further side. The 5 non-commissioned officers go to their quarters, and I go to the wardroom, where my name and particulars of my command, strength numbering 5, are taken. And then I have a whiskey and soda and a cigar. Phew, the relief. W Beach the last few weeks. Let's forget about it. 2:30 a.m. The ship is now nearly full up with troops, and an officer comes in to say we are off. I go up on deck and find that they are just weighing anchor. It is tricky work getting a ship away from improvised piers. The captain is the same naval officer who used to command the Whitby Abbey, which took me to Lemnos and back in July last. Tomorrow night will be his last trip to Gallipoli. At last, after a lot of maneuvering, he shouts from the bridge, "All clear aft?" and a voice answers, "Aye, aye, sir." Then full steam ahead, and we swing round and head out to sea. I watch the lights on shore gradually disappear. One I noticed by 8th Corps Headquarters, being at the top of a post, flickers out and on as regularly as the ticking of a clock. What it means I don't know. I have noticed it before during the past few days. Asia fires to V Beach, and Achi sends a couple which burst on the high ground at the back of W Beach. The lights and the outskirts of the shore disappear. I still see the starlight sailing in the darkness of the night. These soon disappear. For me, the adventures of Gallipoli are no longer realities, but bad memories, and I turn into the wardroom to sleep. 8 a.m. We enter Mudros Harbor, chock full of warships and transports, those on board leaning over the side and watching us with interest. 8.5 months have passed since those days in April before the landing, and the scenes are almost the same today. It seems 8.5 years ago. I go ashore and meet a friend at one of the supply depots, who makes me a guest of the mess. We have a cheery evening. January 9th. We hear the good news that the evacuation went off splendidly. It was a perfect day. The beaches were shelled as usual at intervals by day, but our monitors, destroyers, and 2 cruisers kept their fire under. The Turks apparently appeared to have expended their energies on the 7th and kept quiet. The program followed at Suvla was followed at Helles. At 6 p.m. the final stage of getting the men off was started, and they were rapidly shipped immediately as they arrived at the forming up posts. The beaches were shelled fitfully, and casualties in consequence occurred, but they can only be put down as normal casualties, which have been daily occurring through the enemy artillery activity. The last parties in the line were got away by the same procedure as was followed at Suvla, passing down the roads, their passage being telephoned to the beaches by the officers on duty at the gates. So well managed was it that it was found possible to get many troops off in advance of the scheduled time of departure. Division Headquarters embarked by motor launch onto the HMS Prince George. An enemy submarine was about and discharged a torpedo at the Prince George, but by wonderful luck it failed to explode, but shook the ship from bow to stern. At 2:30 a.m. all men had gone. Only animals were left and vehicles, and I think some animals were left to fall into the Turks' hands alive. January 10th. Go on board the Scotian with Division Headquarters, 29th Division, and part of the 29th Division. January 11th. Leave Mudros Harbor at 8. Day fine and comfortable boat. Troops in good spirits. Boat drill at 10:30 a.m. Submarine lookout all round ship. Boat drill at 4 p.m. 3 spy prisoners on board, 2 Greeks and 1 other. 1 Greek sitting in corner of deck telling his beads all the time. The others walk up and down looking very serious. Serious cases, and things look very black for them. January 12th. Beautiful day. Zigzagging a lot to avoid submarines. Doing 15 knots. Steer cast in morning towards Palestine. Afternoon head for Alexandria with a zigzagging course. January 13th. Arrive Alexandria harbor at 6 o'clock in the morning. Arabs come on board and sell papers. Have a curiously delightful feeling of homecoming. Alexandria seems just like home now, after all those months in Gallipoli. Harbor full of troop ships. Go into the town in the afternoon. Delightful walking about the shops and civilization again. Send cable home. Back on ship again for dinner. 8:30 p.m. Embark on troop train. Cattle trucks mostly. I sleep with Grant and Firth, Divisional Signal Officer, in luggage van. Damned uncomfortable journey. January 14th. We arrive at a junction at 9 a.m. and hear that an engine is off the line at the next station. Broken down, dirty Arab village just opposite, and an oasis. Nothing else but sandy desert. Wait all day and have to wire for rations. New Zealand Army Service Corps comes to our rescue with supplies. Issue same to troops on our train and also to another troop train behind us, with troops on board from Ypres. Troops amuse themselves with football in the afternoon, much to the natives' interest. Arab boys now and again join in, causing amusement. 8 o'clock in the evening we get up a smoking concert on the side of the line. I have been to some curious smoking concerts during the war, but this one, now on, will live in my memory. Desert, moonlight, troop trains lit up, a bit of a fire, and around, Tommies fresh from Gallipoli enjoying the fun to the full. What a nation! We never had a chance at Gallipoli. Let's forget about it. 10 p.m. God Save the King sung, and then off to bed. January 15th. Woke up at 12 midnight. Ration train arrives with rations for tomorrow in case we cannot get on. 2 a.m. Train ordered to move. Get up and load rations onto the train. Arrive Suez 10 a.m. and go on to new camp. For last hour I did a bit of stoking on engine. Rather unique, stoking an engine in an Egyptian desert. Arrive at large camp, the largest that I have ever been into. Tents everywhere, laid out in perfect order. Coolies, Arabs, and Hindus unloading stores from trains, which arrive at frequent intervals on the single line running through the camp. Epilogue, January 20th. Finds me in camp with a tent to myself and things working smoothly. Everything as far as humanly possible is ready for any eventuality, and the Turk, if he tries any tricks, will get his knuckles badly rapped. The King's Own Scottish borderers go by to the wild, inspiring strains of the pipes. Everything is bustle. Trains shunting, stores coming up, horsemen and guns moving into position, and there is an air of expectancy over everything. And so these random notes come to an end. I am back in camp with the horrors of the peninsula left behind me forever. Of those who sailed from England so light-heartedly in March, few are left, but those that remain are attached to each other by invisible fetters. Those strange months, dull and exciting, tragic and humorous, spent under the eye of the enemy on an alien shore, form a common bond between us. All of us now know the full meaning of life, and all of us have walked not once but many times with death on the grim peninsula. We have been beaten, not so much by the enemy as by climatic and geographical conditions, but beaten we are, and nothing remains but to accept defeat like sportsmen. End of section 23. End of Gallipoli Diary by John Graham Gillam.